We are almost starting. This session is going to be recorded, and I'm going to be moderating it. Welcome, everyone. Please, Arnaldo, you are going to start. So do you want to share the slides you've prepared? Okay, I'm going to wait a moment. I'm going to make you able to do it. Please, Arnaldo, I think that now you are able to share the slides. Can you try? Okay.
All right, just a minute. Can you all see the slides?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you. So we are going to start, everyone, and Arnaldo is going to speak with us. Thank you, Arnaldo, for being here today, and thank you. I really appreciate that you've accepted our invitation to speak with us today. You can go on and make a show to us. It's going to be a very great moment, a very nice moment.
Thank you. So, good morning to everybody. Like here in Brazil, it's like 10 a.m. from a Saturday, so probably some people are just still awakening, or they have awakened a lot time before. I'm not a native English speaker, so if I don't know, if I misspell anything, just forgive me. I just want to do this the best way possible and to talk a little bit about the development and the advanced technologies and data governance that are some hot topics about internet governance nowadays. To do so, we have to go through some concepts that I feel that it's better to know better. And with these concepts, we can dialogue better with the structures of the advanced technologies, and also go to some topics that rely on data governance. At first, I feel like we have to talk a little bit about what are advanced technologies. Let me just see if okay. You're still seeing it? I feel like, okay. The term advanced technologies refers to a set of innovative cutting-edge technologies that we use and we see every day about the innovation of technology and how this innovation can impact on our lives and now on our ways to do the things nowadays. Here in the slides, I put some of the examples that we can face about advanced technologies that can be artificial intelligence, virtual reality, Internet of the Things, and the 3D printing as a matter of fact. So, go. So let's talk about advanced technologies and data governance. We have to know some concepts. What are these advanced technologies that we are talking about? At first, we came with the artificial intelligence that is a new perspective of the development of technology that talks a little bit about the building, the constructing, and the And it involves the development of systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as patterns recognition, natural language processing, machine learning, and autonomous decision making. Virtual reality is a way that creates computer simulated environment that provide the users with immersive experience in a virtual world. Internet of Things refers to the interconnection of physical devices, vehicles, sensors, and other objects to the internet, enabling the data collecting and sharing technology. It talks a little bit about the automation, the monitoring and control of devices and processes. And I felt that it was really distinct to put the 3D printing because it is something that is new, but since I was like researching a little bit to do this talk, I never thought really about it as advanced technology, but it is. So um, we can make something in the internet and try to build it like physically in our real world. And the 3D printing is a way that we can most likely put it in a specific way that is physically. So nowadays we have a lot of advanced technologies and we have a lot of things that we might talk about the development of society and the internet at all. One of the first things that we might discuss here is about the regulation of AI. Talking about regulation is talking about the possibility of the government to put some rules that need to be followed by the other actors in global perspective. And nowadays we have a run of regulation specifically for AI because we have a development really faster of internet of things, and AI is one of the most sightseeing things we have now today. The AI that is a regulation and the first international regulatory instrument approved, that is an European regulatory instrument to regulate the AI. The focus of the regulation is to build some principles and some other structures that can put measures to the development and analysis of the development of AI. The improvements that it brings to the legislation and the development of regulation is the systematic that they put about AI systems and the structure of levels of risk that AI can be based on. So there are 4 identified risk levels in this regulation that I feel that it's interesting to talk a little bit about. The first one is the unacceptable high, the second one is a high risk, the third limited risk, and the minimal or insignificant risk level. Those levels base the structure of the development or not the to intervene of the state. So the classification aims to ensure that regulation is adequate and proportionate to the involvement risks. And by this, it allows more rigorous requirements for systems that have the potential to cause significant harm while providing a more flexible approach for lower risk systems. Also, the regulation puts some other principles that goes through the transparency requirements that brings a perspective that we can understand what is done by internet and AI. The transparency requirements go through explainability, that is, how it's clear and how the system can explain their way of functioning. So developers and operators must be able to provide clear and understandable information about how the system makes decisions and generates results. The second transparency requirement is the technical documentation. So we need to have some documents to know how it was developed and how it is going. So the documentation should include detailed information about the system's performance, limitations, technical characteristics, as well as the information about training data set and what is used nowadays. The third one is independent testing. The independent testing basically verify the compliance with the established rules and regulations. So it certifies the development of the AI and its risk level, as a matter of fact. Clear information for users, that is the way that we can really understand what it's doing, what it's doing, and how it was developed to do. And the access to training data is like the way that the state can see what was developed for and how is it going. So with this, like little concepts, we can see that the regulation of AI needs some kinds of transparency and the development of the analysis of the risk of the development of the structure of another system. Although the European is the first international regulatory instrument approved, we have another ways and other countries that are trying to regulate AI. So due to some research, I've seen that Ghana, Canada, Brazil, US, all of them are in the run to establish more structured regulation. And I feel that it is a present thing that will bring another perspectives to the future. I don't know if I'm being like understandable, because it's kind of difficult to talk in English and think in English, but I hope that you're following it.
We
So-
are
Don't worry, Arnaldo.
understanding you. Don't worry.
If I may also, so we can have a dialogue during each other's
All right.
presentation, and please interrupt me as well in mine. And one important thing about this AI regulations that are happening worldwide, the different formats that are being adopted are usually when we are talking about internet governance. We prefer regulations that, speaking in a civil society position, we prefer regulations that follow a principial logic way, based on principles, based on general orientation, etc. But as you can see in the example of Brazil, where we have two bills that are running in parallel, they both are about regulation AI. One of them is more principal logic, and the other have a little bit more rules. And in this case, rigid rules, I mean. And in this case, it seems that it's better for civil society, the ones with more rules. What's the thing about the difference between general internet governance models? The idea here is protecting fundamental rights, protecting users' rights, and all these ideas. And in this case, artificial intelligence regulations that are more or overly principal logic ends up favoring private sector interests. So it's a really interesting thing when we that come from internet governance formation, usually having a little bit of not exactly fear, but being careful with regulations that are too rigid or have too many rules that can stifle innovation. In the case of artificial intelligence, of course, you cannot be really rigid with rules or posing too much rules, but at least a moderate amounts of rules are necessary when we're talking about AI related to risks. That's exactly why the AI Act has as its core and risk analysis, and the 2338 2023 regulation of Brazil has the same idea as its source as well. So sorry, Arnaldo, just to mention something that I find very interesting about AI regulation.
No problem. It was really like great because it puts some perspective, like it goes deeper. Thank you. So going to data governance, we came to a perspective that I can talk a little bit about due to the international perspective. Data governance involves defining roles, responsibilities, but not only this, it develops the way that we see the development of the internet, the development of these technologies, and how the structured countries are trading about this. When we talk about governance, we talk about the way that we rule or not rule, the way that we put security measures to develop and talk about some things, despite having or not having any laws to talk about it. So to understand a little better data governance, we have to just a minute. We have to go through the roles, the responsibilities, but also the principles that the state put and the state have to measure the compasses between protection, privacy, security, transparency, ethics, and collaboration. And these are the most debated items on the researches about governance and internet governance, as a matter of fact. The risks that we are researching are exactly about how internet and the development of internet propose some debates and some violations of human rights, and not necessarily because internet is being developed, but how the measures, how the structure that is developed there brings us the perspective of these violations, how we put the diversity in the core of the talking, in the core of the ways that we develop new technologies. So in this slide, we talk about protection, privacy, security, also the control and assess data impacts as a geopolitical measure. When talking about governance, we face the rule that all states have the most equitable power in this international society. So if you cannot regulate above the state, how can you put measures that will be likely to each other, every country in the world? The development is needed, so we have to the development of regulation that is going to be applied in all the countries as a basis and respecting their regulation, their laws, and their principles. Also, sovereignty and national security are important things that states uses to regulate better the development of our of the governance. As a matter of fact, the state needs to bring the perspective of security, and national security is the most important thing. We cannot bring other regulations without the respect to our legislation, to our principles, to our state. Data governance affects the global economy, and privacy policies vary worldwide. The economy is one of the things that most have impacts, because the ways of economy in global perspective varies, and specifically talking about work, labor, and respect of human rights. This is needed as a basis to the development of policies. Also, the cooperation is the most important thing when talking about international play with leviathans. This is the last slide. I will talk about global movements, and the global movements are the way that civil society takes and review the standards and agendas of the development of these governance to our day-to-day experience. We see every day the development of new rules, new establishment, new measures that put security as a basis. And the civil society puts the perspective of how these developments impacts our lives daily, especially if you are part of the diversity, and how the diversity is treated by the new agenda, the development of the security measures. Here in Brazil, we have some campaigns that talk about the way that our system, that our security systems puts in dialogue with the criminalization of especially Black people, but not only. We nowadays have other talks about how the LGBTQ plus community is treated, and how the development of new technologies affect the personality of people, especially LGBTQI, especially, as a matter of fact, the transgendered and non-binary people. And those campaigns put on perspective these debates. Is the facial recognition neutral, or it does have some points that need to be better? Here we have some development of militants that talks about the imprisonment of Black people in big parties that we have, like Carnival and some others, but not necessarily because the people did anything, but because the facial recognition has some troubles and some problems that puts different persons, just because they are Black and they have some phenotypic ways, in the same role. And although they are not the same people, these people are criminalized. Also, I bring the perspective of the campaign of All Out, that is an international campaign developer talking about LGBTQI people. The talk is directed to European community, and specifically about the definition of who you are by the facial recognition. Going through airports or any public segments, the computers bases the recognition and the gender situation of the person based on a bias, not asking what the person identifies with. So these are some of the campaigns, but there are a lot more. I also bring here another campaign that talks about the hate speech and the development of measures to educate and fight against the hate speech in the internet promoted by UNESCO, and other initiatives like OLABI, Opportunity Lab, Internet Lab, Hiperderechos, Coding Rights, Derechos Digitales, TEDIC, Data Género, that are trying to promote a more inclusive and plural ways of the development of internet and the participation of other actors that are not only the cisgender male white men. I this is all. I feel like I am giving the speech to Pedro. I hope that you understand a lot and that you bring any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnaldo. You gave us a lot of great informations, and now we are going to let Pedro speak a little bit about some informations that he has studied and made research about, and I am going to tell everyone, please stay here with us. We are going to have one more speaker, and also please feel free to make questions, to send us your doubts. I see that we have one question here, and we are going to be answering all of your questions. We are here to, of course, if we know the answer, we are going to try to make clear all the informations. Please, Pedro, go on.
There we go. I couldn't find my my mic button here. So first of all, can you hear me well? This earphone does not have. Okay, so
yes, we hear
I think
you.
we can go. I think before starting the presentation, I'll be a little bit more focused on how they work, how these technologies and emerging technologies work from not exactly a technical perspective, but a functional perspective when we talk about regulation, because regulation, when we are talking about policy and how to create adequate laws for these technologies, we kind of center not on the details of how it works, but on the effects of what this technology causes to the world. And for that, of course, we need to know a little bit of its functioning, right? So before that, I think that it's important that we start with the general framework, the general idea of the debate that we have here. Because when we're talking about emergent technologies, we are kind of resurrection, one of the most important initial debates of the internet itself. So those old questions that were applied to the internet, we are applying now to artificial intelligence, to IoT, to metaverse, etc., etc. Is it possible to regulate it? Do we want to regulate it? should we regulate it? Do we need to regulate it? So, of course, to the internet, we already know many of these answers. We had at the first initial moments those cyber anarchists, the cyber libertarians position that we couldn't regulate it, that it would be really bad regulated. But now, ever since at least Lawrence Lessig book on code as law, I don't remember if code's law, or I don't codes or code 2.0, and other authors that were writing about the same thematic at the same time, we understood that yes, we could regulate it, and not just that, but we need to regulate it. So it's important to know how to regulate it. We cannot put regulations that may fragment the internet, that may break the internet, that may affect one of the critical properties of the internet, as Internet Society always put it. But at least a small degree of regulation to protect fundamental rights and to protect users of this technology is necessary. So the GDPR, for example, we had a lot of criticism related to it. We had a lot of things that say it would affect some aspects of the efficiency of the internet, but the gains surpass by a lot the amount of harm to the technology that we have. So this is the general idea that we have to always keep in mind, because the debate here is an old one. It's regulation versus innovation, and this is at least at some level a false debate. It's deeply stimulated by and repeated by the private sector, or people that are not really studying critically the subject, because there is some conflict, there is some contradiction, but it's not an absolute opposition. Even big tech asks for regulation, even if it's commonly not for reasons that are that noble, such as creating barriers for potential competitors. But it's almost like common sense. We can have innovation with some standards, some rules that may affect, at least in some level, how fast the technology is developing or the efficiency of that technology, but are necessary for many other reasons. After all, these technologies serve a purpose, and this purpose should always be human-centered. Ours. There is no point in innovating fast if the gains end up concentrated in things that harm humanity in general, such as inequality, crime, war weapons. There's no sense of innovation if all the innovation is just going in that direction. So the problem, but I'm not talking anything new. I'm not talking anything that is, let's say, relevant to the debates, but it's something that is solving anything. So why does those countries and intergovernmental organizations do not reach an agreement on how to put some hard rules, some imperative rules on the subject? Because we have the same problem with the internet here in emerging technologies as well. Both extraterritorially, oh my God, I hate this word, extraterritorially, transnational effects of these technologies, and transnational effects of the rules related to these technologies, and run to the bottom issue, because companies will tend to choose to base themselves on countries that are more lenient, that are more flexible with a regulation related to what they are developing. And this means that if we cannot reach a global standard, we may have inefficient global rules about this, because they will be countries still have sovereignty on what they are doing to their they have sovereignty, they will keep having sovereignty about what they are doing in their territory. And if a company develops their technology there with flexible rules, they will go on, they can kind of ignore, at least at some level, the global standards that are being posed. And the thing here is that this choosing of these companies have deep economic effects. So it's good to these countries that have flexible regulations to have these companies based, at least when you're looking for a strictly economic perspective. And so it's really, really hard to agree, especially when we're talking about countries that are competing for power, competing for influence in the international system nowadays. For example, the US and China, and the European Union in the middle in fundamental rights narrative and everything. But when we consider those two, we have a hard problem of we cannot regulate strictly. We cannot put that much rules to avoid problems with our users with fundamental rights, because if I do that, I will give some space for my competition to surpass me. So that's the general problem that we have on this issue. Let me see. So I will go really fast about the technologies themselves. First of all, blockchain. Sorry, just is there a bar in the screen blocking some of the text?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, it's out now.
Yes, we can see now.
Okay.
Thank you, Pedro.
So first of all, we need to define what's blockchains, right? Blockchains, to be very short about it, a little bit non-precise on the definition, but they are a special kind of database. They a database that chains together blocks of information referring to a set of transactions meaning general information, general data that is inserted, that is registered in the blockchain. So this information is called transactions. Is this TX here? It's spice, but the TX is just an aspect of these blocks. Sorry, is someone? I think it's just an open mic. There is a lot of other technology that is a part of the blockchains that are related to the overall objective of security and a tendency towards immutability. And also it's important to note that there are a lot of blockchains. We shouldn't talk about a blockchain, one kind of blockchain. They can be closed blockchains. They can even blockchains with centralized authorities, because they are just a range of ledgers that share some fundamental principles. But the most famous blockchains, when we're talking about cryptocurrency, Ethereum with smart contracts, IoT, they are based on shared, decentralized peer-to-peer networks of participants, where each element is called a node and stores a local copy of the blockchain, or at least part of the blockchain, depending on the model used. And every node and the system by itself acts according to a certain consensus protocol. This operation of these protocols can vary greatly, and the best choice depends on the use for which each distributed ledger technology is intended. So you surely have heard about proof of work used by the Bitcoin network, or proof of stake, to which Ethereum, I don't know if it's already finished, probably finished, but it was implementing migration. It's more efficient on the use of resources. It tries to avoid that criticism about it being really costly on energetic terms and ambiental terms. But we have like dozens of alternatives of this protocol. So it's always important to remember here when I'm talking about blockchains that this open nature, this decentralization, etc., is not an inherent or necessary characteristic of the technology, but the ones that we find most interesting because they can be used for things like I don't know how this I should call it in English, does anyone know cartórios? Like the public registries that we have, they can be used as an alternative for that. Not exactly as an alternative, but as something that may substitute coming from the private sector, coming from civil society. But even the ones that are closed can have some good application, interesting applications. For example, a lot of banks are using centralized and closed blockchains. So I mentioned that it's tending towards immutability because it's not really immutable. It's not really how they call it, intemperable, that cannot be tempered. It cannot be modified, etc. Because we can do that in very specific situations, mostly known as the hard forks, soft forks, hard forks, where 50% plus one of the nodes that are part of the system that runs the protocol agree to a certain change. So they can change the registry with that idea. And you can also have some corrective changes, right? You have like this sequence of blocks that are, one important thing, they are connected by hashes, by cryptographic functions. And if you change the one of the blocks of this chain, it will, since they are connected by an information that arises from the informations, for all the information that are inside the block. When you change the information inside the block, you will change the connection with the next block, and then you will change you can see that something what is wrong with the whole chain. But you can also add an extra information at the end of the chain saying that, oh, the information before, the one that is 3 blocks before, I don't know how much before, is wrong, and it should be read as etc. Of course, you can see everything that went before, but you are also mentioning that that it should be read, it should be understood as something different when you go to the end of the chain. There are some technical aspects here. You can identify the participants by private and public keys. This gives a lot of security, but also gives anonymity. So the thing about a crime and blockchains are related to this. You don't need to truly know who the person on the other side is, but you need to know the key that this person has, the person has. And there are a lot of technical aspects that I think are not really relevant to us now, considering the time that we have. So the next thing that is really interesting about these emerging technologies are smart contracts, also related to blockchain. It is a term that may cause some confusion at first. There is actually no necessary reference at all. It's to intelligence. Like smart contracts are not smart. They are just the definition that Nick Szabo gave when he coined the concept in the 90s is really, it's better to understand. It's like a computerized transaction protocol that executes the terms of a contract. It's like just an automated contract. They say that the prototypical versions of smart contracts are vending machines. So the idea is kind of the same, but the thing here is that when it's integrated with blockchain, they have a lot more security, predictability, and speed in the execution of operations. But most of all, they are auto-executory and they cannot be changed inside the technology. Of course, after that happens, if there are some transactions and you can identify the people who are in each part of these smart contracts, you can go to court and you can ask for the transaction to be reverted. But we are talking specifically about the technology, the thing that we wrote there, because of the tendency to immutability of the blockchain, it will be executed. So you have like this certainty, the security that will follow, and you are kind of substituting the traditional executory means of negotiations of relations that we have in the traditional world, let's put it that way. So you don't need a court to enforce the contract that you made with someone. You can do that automatically through the program itself. So that's the great thing about smart contracts. But it's also important to note that smart contracts are neither smart and neither always contracts. So to be a contract, it's just a program that executes a command, but to be a contract, you need to establish it. You need, for example, to have someone that's a programmer and someone who is a law professional together to be sure that the things that you inserted as a program to be auto-executed are also legally recognizable as a contract. And it's easy to do that. We have a principle of contractual law that is basically that contracts have a free form and they are very flexible on what can be considered a contract or not. But you cannot, for example, there are some specific rules to certain fields of law, such as considering rights in intellectual property, that you have to follow certain rules. But in general, you cannot, for example, put some illegal clauses. I cannot have a contract, enforceable contracts by courts of buying and selling drugs, illegal drugs, cocaine, and etc. in many countries around the world, because that will not be recognizable as a valid contract. So that's an important part. Just because it's called contract, it's not legally recognized contract. Oh, just a second. There we go. And then we get to the NFTs that now are not that relevant, but it was probably the less hype before. What's the hype now? ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, the nowadays hype, but NFTs, you remember, were very famous. And I think I will focus a little bit more on these ones because there are a lot of confusion on what those are. First of all, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are not the object that they represent, that they point to. So tokens, to start from the beginning, tokens are the representation of facts or rights, which can roughly be approximated to the idea of symbols. Tokens are symbols, most of all. So blockchain tokens, they are basic elements attached to network transactions in this ledger. So there were first made famous, the tokens in general, but fungible tokens were first made famous through cryptocurrencies, but they can represent a wide variety of items and rights, such as assets outside of the blockchain with several different functions. For example, company shares, participation in profits, representations of a certain object that exists in an analogical world. But the tokens are fungible when they can be interchangeable with others of the same type and value, and even visible in smaller parcels, as we have with cryptocurrencies. But a non-fungible token is essentially different because each one is unique. You can, of course, change a non-fungible token with another fungible token or another non-fungible token. You can sell a non-fungible token for Bitcoin, for example. But the thing that we will end up having at the end of the transaction is different. So if I change one Bitcoin by one Bitcoin from different persons, I will have the same thing at the end. But if I send an NFT of one piece of art with another NFT of a piece of art, even if it's from the same piece of art, they are different things, because the representation itself, the token itself, is different. So these general notions, they are just the surface of what NFTs are, without explaining their nature or how they work. So delving a little bit deeper, the most basic and commonly used form, because it can assume other forms, NFTs are metadata about a given digital file that passes through hash functions and is written to the blockchain using smart contracts. Commonly, just so you know, the ERC-721 or the ERC-1155. The process of inscribing it in the blockchain is known as minting. And the idea of writing the metadata itself and not the work itself in the blockchain is because it costs a lot to do this maintenance process. So putting an entire piece of art in a traditional blockchain that the gas cost to ascribe something on it is really high, it costs a lot of money. So describing just metadata that passes through a hash function is really cheaper. And then what this metadata is doing is a metadata with certain information pointing to where the file, the digital file itself is hosted. So what NFTs are in its most basic definition, it's pointers, or we can call it certificates, but they do not have really the power of certificates. They're more like pointers or receipts of a certain digital work that's pointing to. So, for example, when you buy an NFT, you don't get absolutely no rights about the digital work that you are buying that the NFT is pointing to. You can have rights if, when buying it, you have a contract that may be a smart contract, maybe a traditional contract, mentioning and determining that you are also getting those rights, more rights when buying the NFT, copyrights or proprietary rights or rights related to the company, etc. But you need to have that on contract. So something that works outside of the technology, something that works outside of the NFT of the blockchain itself. Yeah, of course, if you inscribe a smart contract that does that in the blockchain, it is something that's happening inside the blockchain, but it's something that is not automatically arise from the technology. And this also means that the technology alone, the NFT, does not reflect a guarantee of authenticity of the digital file itself. The NFT is not the digital file, and owning the NFT don't means that I own the original digital file there. For example, the person that bought the NFT of the first tweet does not own the first tweet. They have a pointer saying that they bought that first tweet, and that's kind of it. There was someone that bought, for example, the how do you call it? The screenwriting of a movie, the NFT of a screenwriting of a movie, and thought they could change and make a lot of new works arising from that screenwriting. And then after buying it, the owners of the copyrights related to that work said, no, you didn't bought any of the copyright related to that. You just bought the NFT that is referring to this screenwriting. So, and that's it. It's really important to be careful about working with NFTs to understand what it really is and what it's not. Let me go here. How much? This just a small example of what NFTs really are, and the paths that they go there. One of the most famous NFTs that was Beeple's Everyday, sold for a few dozens of millions of euros. Was essentially this. The first block is what was being sold on the auction house. After clicking on the wallet address and the token ID, you get the second image below the first one, and the information that was transformed in a hash with the metadata of the image, say pointing to where the image is hosted, is the one on the right. And I think I will end it here, and then we can talk a little bit more on artificial intelligence after all, because artificial intelligence is probably the one thing that most of you are having contact with nowadays. But metaverse is also something that people were doing a lot of confusion about. And the first thing, it's an ambiguous concept. A few people, I think that most people use metaverse with different meanings. And it's important to notice that as with blockchains, but even in a deeper format here, in a deeper understanding here, it's not the metaverse, it's metaverse. Each company or even public sectors are developing their own metaverses, and they do not are characterized by interoperability nowadays. So it's possible to do that in the future, maybe, but each metaverse is a whole different universe from each other. Only if the companies agree to connect with one metaverse with other, we can talk about like a bigger metaverse connections between that. But there is Meta's metaverse, there is Roblox metaverse, there is, I don't know, those many options that we have around. And an important thing to notice is that they are mostly used as a synonym of cyberspace. Most of the times that we see people talking about metaverse, there is roughly nothing really new, like in relation to Second Life or in relation to World of Warcraft. It's the difference here is that the idea of metaverse is like a set of technologies that seek a greater insertion of people and their experience in the digital world, usually involving virtual reality or augmented reality. And the new technologies related to the metaverse are centered in inserting people in these virtual worlds more deeply with glasses and suites and more sensorial experiences. Like it's just a deeper level of insertion. And of course, more interactions, more possibilities inside, new technologies, etc. But the basic idea is roughly the same as we had in Second Life, in World of Warcraft, including, and this is an important part of a relevant part of the metaverse, is that probably the most interesting feature of the metaverse, because it's a continuation of something that existed before Meta started pushing the concepts a little bit more incisively, is gamification. So the idea that we have there in MMORPGs are probably being continuated, are probably being more developed to be to have more participation of these new technologies of augmented reality, virtual reality. And this is probably the most interesting part of the metaverse to the future itself, because we still do not have guaranteed that other functionalities, for example, for meetings and for spending hours of our days in the metaverse, will really go through in the current situation that we have here. Because for example, for having a meeting, it's still a lot harder to join into a metaverse, these new metaverse facilities, than just opening a Zoom call, having a WhatsApp call, something like that. So there still needs to be found this functionality of how metaverse can be used for business, for I don't know, things that would require this digital interaction and cannot be easily substituted by other technologies that are not immediately related to the concept that we have now of the metaverse. And this is important because this may happen in the future. Like these technologies, the thing about with virtual reality and augmented reality is that the glasses, the suits, all of this the prices are decreasing fast. So maybe in 10 years, something like that, we may have the facility, the same facility of joining a Zoom call in something that is more inserted in this virtual reality worlds. And of course, when integrated with other technologies such as the NFTs itself, we may have more of similar experience to the traditional world, to the analogical world in the digital cyberspace. So I think we still had a lot of things to talk about artificial intelligence, bias, but this is the part that if you are interested in emerging technologies, we have you will have more content with that. Sorry, Elsie, you mentioned something. No, it was just an open mic. So I think that's it, because I don't want to extend that much. And if someone is interested about, we will share the presentations afterwards. And if someone is interested in the artificial intelligence discussion, then we can go back to this and present a bit of the slides that we could not talk just about now. So, Denise.
Thank you,
back to you.
Pedro. It was very interesting. And I also put here on the chat that I was thinking about the internet fragmentation. If maybe in some sense in the future, when we get too involved in the metaverses and in the platforms, if maybe is there any danger of internet fragmentation caused by the regulations of the platforms and the metaverses? Since when we are users of the platforms, we sign the contracts, and in sometimes we give them the right of our image and other rights. And I don't know, I got a little worried when you started speaking about it. So what do you think? Are we in danger?
This is to me or to Arnaldo, just to be sure. It's for both of us. I can start talking about it, give the floor to Arnaldo afterwards. Yeah, there is some risk of fragmentation. We have three main types of fragmentation nowadays: the governmental fragmentation, technical fragmentation, and commercial fragmentation. And commercial fragmentation are mostly based. The principal example of it are the walled gardens. Like some companies have become so big that they have so many services connected among themselves that they kind of only work really functionally when you are using the services of this platform, the general services of the platform. For example, a good easy example: Google Meet and Google Chrome. You have to use, if you are accessing through the browser, you have to use Google Chrome to get the most of Google Meets. But this, of course, is related to a lot of more things. When Facebook does the zero rating thing about giving access, having how do you say it? Having deals with network operators to give their access to Facebook for free and not to other services. So the people kind of confuses the internet with that service of that company. And these commercial walled gardens, they have a really big potential to be exponentially dangerous in the metaverse, because metaverse is the idea of inserting yourself into the digital world a lot more. So if we don't have interoperability, that's a basic thing that people are advancing a lot about, having a good metaverse. To have a good metaverse as the general idea, as one metaverse, is that we have to have interoperability between the different metaverses that are being created. And if we don't have interoperability, the risks of having a walled garden, the risk of having a fragmented internet, because the only experience that I will have when using that will be the experience that is provided, that's being directed by a certain company, is really, really high, because it's not something. I believe that it will be not something that as easy as just pressing a button to go from Google Chrome to Firefox, or from one website to another. You'll be, if you are more inserted on that, there is also a higher cost of changing between platforms, if that's not facilitated by the companies or by mandatory standards imposed by the government itself. So sorry, I talked so much already. Please go on if you have any consideration.
No, thank you a lot, Pedro. It was much clearer for me, but now I am a little bit afraid for the future and worried about all these aspects and stuff that we've talked about today. Please, Arnaldo, if you want to speak something and about any topics or any thing that people have sent on the chat.
Okay, so I'm reading some of the things here, but I follow entirely what Pedro said about your question. It goes through this way, and I feel like we have to be a little afraid about the security measures, what we do not know specifically, because there are some things that are being developed that we do not face. And like we had not long ago some of interventions of the US in other countries with drones, and the drones bring like the bombs and another ways to inflict pain and destruction in these countries. And these are things that need to be regulated, and we need to be like really watching and knowing better what has been developed. But I feel like the specifically on IA that we have not anything that need to be alarmed. Also, Terezinha has put here a perspective on the metaverse that I feel like it represents entirely what metaverse is. We have now, I don't know if it is a study or just a conclusion of somebody, but the metaverse is something that is seen as something that was born already dead. Like, no, there is not a bigger flux of people there, and we see it, but we see that it exists, but it's not really accessible for everybody. And so I feel like the debate on metaverse cannot be like, is it the new future, but how can it be the future? But I feel like this is only a conversion that I can do against now. If you have any other question, I don't know.
No, I posted in the chat something interesting about what Ronaldo was talking about drones. There's a really good book about that from Gregory Shamayo. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, about the theory of the drone that makes an analysis of how it's mostly about kill boxes, how drones, the use of drones in wars are essentially a zone of non-regulation, and how the legislation, how the international rules about war consider that the space between the space of effects of drone bombing was a zone that was almost free, like a small square that appeared in the moment that the bombing was happening, of no applicable war regulations on that area. So even if the drone bombing affected civilians or affected innocents, that space around the bombing that went into a person that was identified as a terrorist, etc., made it safe for the operators of the drone to use it without fear of war sanctions. So it's really a great example of the things that we were talking before, the lack of regulation in developing new technologies, what kind of effect that may lead us to.
Thank you, Pedro and Arnaldo. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I see that we are receiving some questions and more messages, but we are going to finish the meeting now because we don't want it to be too long. but we are going to answer. I think that Pedro is sending a message about if you want to speak, Pedro. I think
No, no.
maybe it's better.
You can, okay, just be really fast here. Yeah, so the first question, can this lead to money laundering, financing the terrorism? It is. It's one cryptocurrency, one of the great issues that led to many regulations in the world nowadays, including one in Brazil that is really recent, a development of regulations that ended up with one that is from this year or last year. But the main thing that people were trying to regulate, besides tax, besides tributes related to cryptocurrencies, is about money laundering and it being used to crime, etc. Because the general idea there is that you can be anonymous and it's really hard to track the transactions. So it is also a perfect tool for criminal activities. And does blockchain have any compliance tests for Brazil? Is a member of FATF, CFATF. Yes, the United States is actually also pushing that kind of regulation a lot around the world. They have this great preoccupation of extraterritorial financing of terrorists activities. So they need and they push a lot for transparency in financial transactions. And one of the effects in Brazil is that we have in the last 4-5 years, a few regulations, be it on legal level or infra-legal level, about blockchain, but blockchain mostly focused on cryptocurrency. So yes, there is, and there are some standards of good practices, some imperative rules, some definitions of what the public institutions here have to observe and have to enforce in these transactions, what you should report to them, etc., etc. Sorry, Denise, that's it.
Thank you, Pedro. Don't worry.